I'm going to show you an absolute massacre. This game was played between one of the most promising junior players in the world, Wei Yi, 19 years old, against Stocek, who is a grandmaster from the Czech Republic. He's in his 40s, a grandmaster, a decent player, but frankly not in the same league as Wei Yi. Well, let's see what happened. So Wei Yi with the white pieces, and it's a pretty orderly start from both players. A Sicilian, always like to see that, not a Najdorf. Black goes into the so-called four knights system, or the classical system, bringing the knights out. And white plays the Richterhauser with bishop g5. Now that has a very good reputation, because white plays quite aggressively, castling queenside, but at the same time has a pretty orderly pawn structure and decent development. So you kind of get the best of both worlds here with white. Sometimes you can play for a quick attack, but sometimes you simply play very positionally as well. And this is quite an old variation. Those of you with long memories will recall that this was played in one of the Fischer-Spassky games from their match in Reykjavik in '72. Here Fischer played bishop d3. It was a very, very complex and tense game that finally ended in a draw. But Wei Yi played king b1, which looks like a very normal standard move, just to tuck the king into the corner. And this is a very typical position for this whole variation, where white has exchanged on f6, given up the two bishops, but damaged black's pawn structure. Now at the moment, black's compensation is the two bishops, and at the moment those bishops aren't really doing anything, but they do have potential. And the king is in the middle as well, and that there are pros and cons to having the king here. It's very flexible. Sometimes it can go to the queen side, sometimes the king side, sometimes stays in the middle. But yeah, it's obviously a very dynamic situation, because we have this imbalance in the pawn structure, imbalance with the bishops and knights as well. But black, as I said, has flexibility. Sometimes castling queenside is possible, sometimes castling kingside, depending on how white plays. f5 is the most common move in this position. And then very often the king will duck out to the queenside. But here Wei Yi played g3, which of course is very reasonable. Sometimes this bishop will pop out here. b4 from black, pushing the knight out of the way, and we can see straight away that black is playing in the most direct way, advancing these queenside pawns, and this cramps white's king. Sometimes the pawn will come all the way to a3, sometimes you'll break with b3. But white needs counterplay, basically. Wei Yi played f5, which of course is the kind of normal move in these positions, and white would very much like to put the knight on f4. It makes room for the knight, putting pressure on e6, sometimes going to h5. So here I think Stocek played an excellent move. e5. You can see that controls these important squares, so preventing that knight from moving out here. The downside to e5 is that the d5 square is weakened. Now at the moment it takes a very long time to get one of those knights to d5, so black is okay for the time being. Another possibility is to try and get this bishop to this diagonal, perhaps establishing itself on d5 at some moment, but it all takes time. A very direct way for white to play in this position would be g4, creating room for that knight here. Black can continue and then play bishop d3, perhaps knight h5. Well, an extremely tense situation on the board where both sides have attacking chances. But Wei Yi played knight c1, which also looks reasonable, to open this diagonal. and the knight lends the king support as well. I always like having the knight next to the king. It feels very tidy. Rook c8. Now, this is a clever move. You could advance straight away. This would be the obvious way to play. But in fact, Rook c8 is very clever and very well thought through, actually, because White wants to play bishop c4. But let's see what happens if the bishop does come here. Knight d4 is very powerful, with a discovered attack on the bishop, also threatening the knight. And if knight takes knight, then the rook takes the bishop, and the pawn falls on e4. So that's the point, or one of the points, of rook c8 anyway. Of course, it's a nice home for the rook on the semi-open c-file anyway. And here, well, Wei Yi thought for almost 25 minutes, and he came up with quite a bizarre move, actually. A more regular move, well, we'll see what happens in a second, but g4 could still be considered with perhaps some kind of advance here. Queen h6 is an interesting try, with this idea to give up an exchange, and White has two pawns and a knight against a rook. I mean, that's quite a tense situation. I don't think Black is worse, but you know, that's a straightforward way for White to play. Instead of that, Wei Yi played this move, which frankly is really bizarre. Knight a7. Opening up the c-file, but also letting the bishop into the game. And I have a feeling that Wei Yi had simply miscalculated something, because his queen gets driven back now. So perhaps he missed something. For example, in this variation, here he just played knight d2 and the queen was forced back. For example, but perhaps he miscalculated something here. Perhaps he thought this was possible, but actually Black gets a tremendous position here, and that queen just looks really vulnerable. It can be pushed away at any moment with rook c5, but actually here Black's attack just rolls on. The queen doesn't really perform any useful function on d5, and Black's attack with a3 getting in onto the c3 square is just fantastically strong. You can see this queen d3 to d5. This little adventure has just been a waste of time. So this is the position. So it's gone queen d5, knight a7. Knight d2 from Wei Yi. Bishop c6, simply driving the queen back. So you can see the queen move just had no purpose whatsoever. Knight c4, so he's trying to fight back here. Now, if White were to take on d6, then this e-pawn is hanging at the end of it. Let's just have a quick look at that. So knight takes d6, and you can see that there is a problem straight away, because the bishop attacks the rook in the corner and the pawn on c2. Well, I think that shows that White, in losing time with the queen, has basically neglected his development. So, you know, a simple attack like this is just winning material. Let's go back. So queen c5 just played here. Queen f3. Knight b5. Black building up very nicely. Queen e3. Well, I mean, this is just indecision here. Desperately hoping to go into an endgame. Even that endgame is doesn't look very attractive for White, but I think Wei Yi by this time is absolutely desperate. But, well, Stocek sees no reason to play an endgame. He has such beautiful pieces on the queen side, a ready-made attack, and White's pieces just don't look very good here. and lack of development. You know, there's no counterplay. And this is an excellent move, d5. There is, at the moment, there's no need to move the king to castle. Black's initiative is just rolling on beautifully. If pawn takes pawn, bishop takes, and attacks the knight. And black is also breaking through to c2. So after d5, the knight was forced back. And now a3. So black's strategy has worked like a dream here. If the pawn advances, then it's going to be mate very soon. So basically black is able to force open the queen side. We'll see in a second. Knight e4 played. The queen just nudged back. A bit more pressure here. There's pressure here. There's pressure here. White is unable to hold everything together. Knight b3 played. And now this is a cool move. You know, I'm sure there are lots of good moves in this position, but castle's kingside, fantastic. Just bringing another piece over into the attack potentially. The king is completely safe on g8. So if white exchanges pieces, then we take on b2, and then something very nasty is going to happen on the a file. There's going to be no defense to that. Rook h e1 played, and knight takes c2. Very simple. The queen and the rook guard the knight. The knight attacks queen and rook, and I don't think white would spend very long looking at that one. That's checkmate. So queen h6. And if white captures the bishop, then a2, unsurprisingly, is winning. If king takes, then it's going to be mate on a1. So after this capture, Wei Yi played knight g5. Now this is a bit desperate. Threatening mate, of course, and if this is taken, then f6 opens things up, but it's not too difficult to find a win here. A check, and well, if that's taken, I mean, this is quite funny. We can do something very, very nasty here. Let's keep going. Here, here, here. And, well, it's going to be over very, very soon. Should we get a new queen? We get a new queen. Let's have some fun. Let's get a queen. And then let's chase the king out. Let's give another check. And that's mate. I mean, maybe there's something quicker, but I rather like that. 2 queens on the board. That will do nicely. So after this check, king came to c1. Knight check. And knight f3. And that was the final move of the game. Wei Yi resigned. If knight takes, then simply queen takes. Now what's the score? White is a rook and a bishop down, and the king is in... Well, it's not going to last very long there at all. What a massacre. I think the problem for Wei Yi was that, you know, queen d5 with hindsight is a dreadful move. And clearly this was down to some kind of faulty calculation. And if it goes wrong, you kind of look stupid. If it had gone right, it would have been brilliant. But it's such a counterintuitive move to play the queen to this square in the middle where it can be driven away. But all credit to Jiří Stocek from the Czech Republic, and that enabled the Czech team to defeat China by 3-1 Fantastic victory for them. After 5 rounds, there are only 4 teams with maximum points with 5 wins. We have Azerbaijan, the Czech Republic, Poland and Ukraine. So 6th round pairings: Azerbaijan against the Czech Republic, Poland against Ukraine. The USA were held to a draw by Israel, so they're just 1 point behind. This is building up really nicely. We've still got 6 rounds to go, 11 rounds played in total. Who do you think is going to win? If the USA don't win, I know we have a lot of viewers in the States. So this is my question to my viewers in the USA. If the USA don't win, who would you like to see winning the trophy? I know that's a difficult question to answer, but give it some thought. Anyway, still wide open, and the USA, of course, absolutely there or thereabouts. Still 6 rounds to go. Everything can happen. If you're not a subscriber, then do click on the subscribe button up there somewhere. It's free to subscribe, and click on the bell for instant notifications when a video arrives. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can donate via PayPal with one-off donations, or do consider joining us on patreon.com. Join the inner circle and enjoy the rewards. Thanks for watching.